Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us in awarding the Talcott Parsons Prize to Professor William Labov. As president, it is my pleasure to call to order the 2095th stated meeting of the American Academy. The American Academy of Arts and Sciences was founded in 1780 by John Adams, James Bowdoin, John Hancock, and other scholar patriots during the American Revolution. The mission, in the words of our charter, was to cultivate every art and science which may tend to advance the interest, honor, and dignity and happiness of a free, independent, and virtuous people. The Academy remains committed to that mission, operating as an honorary society, convening leaders from across disciplines, professions, and perspectives to generate solutions to significant challenges. And I say these words even today, January 6, 2021, while shocking and disturbing events are taking place as we speak in Washington, D.C. As part of our commitment to honoring extraordinary achievements in every field and discipline, the Academy offers 10 major prizes and awards. Today's award, the Talcott Parsons Prize, was established in 1974 in honor of the former president of the American Academy. It has been awarded for contributions in the social sciences only 10 times since then, most recently to sociologist Joan Wallach Scott in 2016. This afternoon, we are gathered to honor an Academy member of 44 years whose work in sociology is inextricably linked to social justice. William Labov is a pioneering sociolinguist whose impact and influence has been felt in education, sociology, science, law, and linguistics. His work to demonstrate that the speech of stigmatized groups is as systematic and structured as any other has been a service to the common good, promoting equity, empathy, and understanding within the academic community and across the broader public. Professor Labov is a public beacon of everything the American Academy values, upholding democratic ideals, elevating the use of knowledge, and embracing diversity and inclusion. He's an extraordinarily deserving recipient of the Talcott Parsons Award. As many of you know, this award was announced last year, and our original intention was to gather in Philadelphia for an in-person award presentation and reception. The coronavirus interrupted those and many other plans, but I'm grateful that we could reimagine the program for a virtual setting that allows us to include so many more Academy members, family, friends, and guests who have been inspired by Bill's work over the years. I want to thank Kathleen Hall Jamieson and Nora Newcomb, co-chairs of the Academy's Philadelphia Program Committee, for their intention to host us in person last spring at the University of Pennsylvania. I also want to thank the Linguistic Society of America for co-sponsoring this virtual event and offer a special welcome to all the LSA members who have joined us today. Our program will include all the elements we had planned for the in-person event. In a moment, we will hear from Wendell Pritchett, Provost of the University of Pennsylvania, the institution Bill has called home since 1971. We will follow with the presentation of the award from Stanford University's Penelope Eckert, a former student of Bill's and one of his nominators. Thanks to the help of Gillian Sankoff, Bill's wife and a sociolinguist herself, we will even be able to physically present Bill with the award. And we especially look forward to hearing Bill's acceptance and reflection on his work. The chat function is available for you to share a message with Bill. He may not have time to read messages during the event, but we will be preserving the chat and sharing it with Bill. So please feel free to send your congratulations and well wishes throughout the program. And now it is my pleasure to turn things over to scholar, author, lawyer, professor, civic leader, and the 30th Provost of the University of Pennsylvania, Wendell Pritchett. Wendell?
Thank you, David. Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. As Provost, it's my honor and my pleasure to welcome you as we honor, with great pleasure and more than a little pride, Bill Labov. We've had just a brief interruption of our previously scheduled program, but I'm pleased that we are all together in spirit, if not in the same room on campus. I first want to thank the Academy. I don't get to say this about many organizations, but the American Academy of Arts and Sciences is almost as old as Penn. Now, not that it's a competition, but the Academy, as David told us, dates to 1780. I wish I could tell you the first meeting is here. We're very proud Philadelphians, but it wasn't. It was at Harvard, of course. But as you might guess, Benjamin Franklin, our founder, was a charter member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. So since that time, Penn's mission has not changed: to seek truth and to promote discovery in the pursuit of knowledge that will educate and improve our world. Goals, of course, shared by the Academy. We're going to hear in a few minutes, Professor Labov has spent his remarkable life passionately dedicated to those endeavors. I'm not introducing Bill, as David said, that will be Professor Eckert, but I do want to take just a brief moment to place his important work and our efforts here in a larger context. So as you know, Bill Labov is the founder of Variationist Sociolinguistics. This discipline is dedicated to creating a broad, accessible understanding of language as it's used in society, particularly in region, race, class, and gender. His work has had broad application and influence at Penn and beyond in many fields, including my own of education, housing, and law, as well as sociology, computational, and cognitive science. In our present moment in the United States and in many other countries, people and groups who share the same tongue often seem to be speaking at different languages. Boy, do we know that this week. We listen, but we don't hear. We speak at cross purposes. Two people can listen to the words of others and hear completely different messages. What we hear is shaped by our political leanings. This is true. Again, we know that today. But as Professor Labov has shown over many decades, what we hear is also deeply affected by who we are, by our lived experience as a Black man, as a white woman, as a person of deep faith, or as an atheist, as an LGBTQ or transgender person, and so on. And it's not simply what we hear, but what we say. To take one of his many examples, African-American vernacular is heavily influenced by residential segregation and poverty in this country. As Bill has shown, the stories we tell ourselves, the narratives we create, are intimately linked to our experience. At Penn, the benefits of diversity are obvious to us. Our diversity is our great strength. But the challenges are significant and complex. How can we celebrate difference, but work in concert? How can we listen to objectionable ideas, but hear and also understand the experiences that they reflect? Put simply, how do we know where other people are coming from? As it happens, Professor Labov once gave a pretty good answer to this question. Speaking to Penn undergraduates some years ago on the topic of why he chose linguistics, he said the following: I spend a great deal of my time in the laboratory, at the office, or in class. But the work I really want to do, the excitement and adventure of the field, comes in meeting the speakers of the language face to face, entering their homes, hanging out on corners, porches, taverns, pubs, and bars. I remember Bill once said one time, a 14-year-old in Albuquerque said to me, let me get this straight. Your job is going anywhere in the world, talking to anybody about anything you want? I said, yeah. He said, I want that job. Fortunately for Penn, that job was already taken. So I join you in congratulating Professor Bill Labov on this tremendous honor. And now I'm going to turn it back to David.
Thank you, Wendell. We so appreciate you joining us today and are grateful to the University of Pennsylvania for its generous support as an affiliate of the American Academy. It's now my pleasure to introduce Penelope Eckert, one of the Academy members who nominated Bill for this award, along with Walt Wolfram and John Rickford. Penny is a professor in the Department of Linguistics, professor by courtesy in the Department of Anthropology, and the Albert Ray Lang Professor of Humanities and Sciences at Stanford University. She's a sociolinguist and former student of Professor Labov's at Penn. Penny will deliver brief remarks, including a few words on behalf of the Linguistic Society of America, and present the Talcott Parsons Award. Penny?
Yeah. So when I began graduate school at Columbia, Bill Labov was a new assistant professor. He wasn't your run-of-the-mill assistant professor. He'd already had a career as an industrial chemist. He'd created a new field in his very brief time as a graduate student and had rolled right into his study of African-American vernacular English in Harlem. Bill was dynamite, inspiring, approachable, irreverent. There was always excitement around him. His door was always open, and sometimes he'd shout out to share some new example of the creativity of the kids of South Central Harlem. The excitement and the intense energy of those early days have never let up. Bill has breathed real life into linguistics, real everyday life. He demonstrated to the field that the variability of spontaneous speech is not a problem for the analyst, but a gift. Not noise to abstract away from, but a window into the mechanisms of linguistic structure and in vivo evidence of linguistic change. He made linguistics an empirical enterprise whose data are people's actual speech, rather than examples culled from careful production, elicitation, or intuition. And rather than taking the speech of one or a few individuals as a stand-in for some abstract speech community, Bill began with the community and recognized the speech of individuals as emerging from their forms of participation in that community structure. In the ethnic, racial, gender, age, and class patterns of variability, he identified the path through which linguistic influence spreads, as well as the social boundaries that can inhibit that spread. And in the stylistic variability of every speaker, he found evidence of a whole new level of structure that layers social meaning on top of the semantic content of our utterances. Underlying Bill's work is a fundamental trust in the regularity of all linguistic production, a simultaneous faith in science and in human abilities. And his faith in human abilities is part and parcel of his passion for social justice. Few people can combine their scientific work with work for the social good in the way that Bill has. And this is not the product of an abstract social consciousness. Bill has an endless interest in people, all kinds of people. Over the years, he's gotten to know hundreds, no doubt thousands of complete strangers, listening to their lives, their stories, their concerns, their thoughts and beliefs. And he's marveled at the vast experience, knowledge, and stunning linguistic virtuosity to be found in the streets, in bars and parks, in people's living rooms. This is a virtuosity that is unlikely to emerge in schools, and even less likely to be recognized or valued when it does. And it was both an engagement with the structure of language use and a need to argue for recognition of vernacular virtuosity that led to Bill's classic work on narrative, ritual insults, and the paper that probably has had the most diverse readership, The Logic of Non-Standard English. Bill is most widely known for his tireless work demonstrating to educators and to the wider society that all dialects, whether prestigious or stigmatized, are equally systematic. And for fighting the inverted ideology of institutionalized racism that equates linguistic skill with the skills valued by the school and redefines the school's failure to teach kids to read as kids' failure to learn. Now, Bill has been able to advocate for the speakers of stigmatized dialects because his arguments are built on unassailable scientific evidence. He developed methods for collecting large amounts of natural speech and introduced quantitative, acoustic, and experimental methods to analyze the patterns of variability that emerge in that speech. The strength of this evidence and of Bill's ability to present it powerfully has had far-reaching consequences, extending from the lecture hall to the courtroom. For many, his work on variability, dialectology, and phonological change has had a life independent of the social world in which language unfolds. His contribution to our understanding of the internal, as well as the social constraints on phonological change, the unfolding of change shifts, and their role in dialect differentiation has been monumental and has had a profound effect on our understanding of linguistic change. The Atlas of North American English took us beyond the individual linguistic communities that have been the focus of variation study to examine the broader relations and ideologies, migrations, and settlement histories that bring together language and place. Indeed, for Bill, the linguistic facts are always social facts, and he never loses sight of the social practice in which dialect boundaries emerge and are maintained, and in which some people become leaders, others laggers in sound change. So I joined John Rickford and Walt Wolfram in bearing witness not only to Bill's transformative career, but the mentorship, friendship, and generosity that he's bestowed on us and countless others over the years. Bill is a giant in plain folks' clothing, brilliant and unassuming, intense, generous, and kind. So Bill, it's a great honor on behalf of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences to present you with the Talcott Parsons Prize for distinguished and original contributions to the social sciences, and to read the citation that accompanies this award.
Oh,
To William LeBove. You
That's
came to,
exciting.
you got it? Okay, oh, that's beautiful.
Okay.
You came to linguistics from a career in industrial chemistry, bringing with you a commitment to scientific practice and real-world results. As a linguist, you have devoted yourself to a truly humanistic scientific practice, combining empiricism and scientific rigor in linguistic analysis with a passion for social justice and an abiding interest in people and their stories. You showed us that variability is an essential feature of language, an orderly heterogeneity, simultaneously constrained by linguistic and social structure. You introduced methods to elicit that variability and quantitative analysis to uncover the regularities of variation across the speech community. You proved that linguistic change can be observed in the variability of everyday speech, breaking down the distinction between synchrony and diachrony, and changing forever the way we think about sound change. And you brought your study of sound change to bear in a principled account of regional dialects of American English. You put into practice the conviction that all linguistic varieties are equal, shining a light on the structure of African American vernacular English and on the artistry of its speakers. You fought linguistic discrimination with scientific evidence, called out the role of this discrimination in school failure, and worked tirelessly to enable young speakers of AV to read and to thrive in school. You founded the field of modern sociolinguistics, passing on to generations of scholars your joy in the creativity of everyday speech. Linguist, mentor, pioneer, and founder of variationist sociolinguistics, you have inspired us to see one another as individuals to be valued for what we say and appreciated for the various ways in which we speak. We honor your contributions to the field of linguistics and to our society as a whole.
Thank you very much. Now I will turn the floor over to William LeBove, the 10th recipient of the American Academy's Talcott Parsons Prize. Bill?
Well, I very much appreciate this meeting as a recognition of the contribution I've made to linguistics among the social sciences since I entered the field in the 1960s. And I must acknowledge the help of my colleagues at every stage of the preparation of these remarks. I entered linguistics at the age of 33. I'd worked for 10 years as an industrial chemist, and I brought with me the habits of numerical recording, testing. I left behind my friends in the factory and a decade of trade secrets, and entered into the open pursuit of the universal properties of human language at Columbia University. There I found that linguistics had a very different mode of gathering data. Asking somebody, can you say this? Or relying perhaps on introspection. It occurred to me that the field could profit by the adoption of this new invention, the tape recorder, that preserved what people actually did say. And it was good that I brought my numerical habits with me, because I found that the variation in the way people said the very same words could be measured and shown to be subject to a number of social parameters. In my first efforts to record linguistic variation, I introduced the concept of the linguistic variable, a closed set of possible options with a single value. Linguistics did not seem to be ready for that. A senior colleague told me that the only numbers in linguistics were the numbers on the pages. So I expected decades of stiff resistance to the quantitative study of change and variation. And I was surprised. My first report on the social motivation of a sound change on Martha's Vineyard was greeted with a wave of approval at the national meeting of the Linguistic Society of America. I then took a course on survey methodology at Columbia's Bureau of Applied Social Research. And I carried out a survey of New York City's Lower East Side using a piggyback design, a subset of the survey of delinquency and opportunity by Cloward and Nolan. This graph is typical of the results. It takes off from the observation that New Yorkers sometimes pronounce the R in words like hardcore and sometimes do not, as in hardcore. The graph is based on the speech of the 81 adults that I interviewed in New York City's Lower East Side, grouped into 6 social classes. The percent pronunciation of consonant R is very low in casual conversation, less than 20% by most speakers, as we see at the lower left. It increases to over 50% in the more formal styles on the right-hand side of the diagram. It clearly shows that R pronunciation was conditioned by speech style and the speaker's social status. But there was a third conditioning factor, the speaker's age. The younger the speaker, the greater their use of consonantal R. This reflected an ongoing change in the speech of New Yorkers. Social linguistics, based on the quantitative analysis of variation and change, burgeoning field. 1988, editor of Language, Variation, and Change, which is now in its 33rd year. Since social linguistics has emergence of other journals. Most papers in these journals are based on automatic analysis of data by mixed level maximum likelihood regression. To analyze in an hour would took a month. The annual N-Wave conference, that is New Ways of Analyzing Variation, will have its 49th meeting in Austin, Texas this year. But at several points in the citation for this award, there is also mention of the concern for social justice. The quantitative analysis of the pronunciation of R did not automatically lead to a concern with such matters. But there were social issues involved in the speech of young Black people in New York. I applied to the Office of Education, which funded a study of what was then recognized as non-standard Negro English, more generally referred to now as African American Vernacular English, or AAVE. The goal of this research was to find out the connection, if any, between that speech pattern and the high rate of reading failure in Harlem schools. I enlisted 2 young Black men to interview members of Renza Clubhouse on 112th Street in Harlem. It showed one such result of this work appeared in the Teachers College record. It showed an overwhelming difference in reading progress between the 16 members of the local groups, 46 members, the Covers, the Jets, the T-Birds, and the 32 isolated individuals. We found different had reading problems. A good number were on grade level, and a few were even above it. But only one of the 46 members. Many educational psychologists attributed this failure to verbal deprivation, arguing that Black children lacked any logical structure in their language, that they come to school unable to make statements of any kind. My program and my paper on the logic of non-standard English disagreed. It gave voice to the most eloquent of the group members. Most often reprinted was a discussion between the interviewer, KC, and Larry, 15-year-old member of the Jets. KC had asked the question whether God would be Black or white. We'll hear Larry's answer on the next slide.
He'd be white, man. Why? I'll tell you why. Because the average whitey out here got everything, you dig? And he ain't got shit, you know? You understand? So for that to happen, you know it ain't no black guard that's doing that bullshit. Yeah, I gotta go for that, boy. Hey, that's square business, man.
The laughter of the audience registers the fact that Larry has won the logical argument using AAVE. The special target of proponents of the verbal deprivation position was the absence of the copula as the verb to be. Our analysis showed that this absence is actually a form of contraction and can occur only in certain grammatical constructions, only where standard English can contract, can AAVE delete it. First, in the sound clip, Larry said, if you're good, you go into heaven.
When they be saying if you good, you go into heaven, that's bullshit.
A little later in Larry's argument, we hear a sentence where he does not delete the copula. He twice repeats the phrase, this is hell.
Well, let me tell you, it ain't no hell, because this is hell right here, you know? Yeah, this is hell right here.
How to explain Larry's use of the full form, this is hell? It's considered the fact that standard English does not contract this structure to this hell. In other words, AAVE and standard English are not foreign languages. They're cousins. Our analysis, published as Contraction, Deletion, and Inherent Variation of the Copula, introduced the first linguistic use of multiple regression in the form of the Warburg program, an ancestor of today's mixed-level regression analysis programs. The weight of social linguistic information on AAVE accumulated until it was brought to bear in a cry for social justice through legal channels. This happened when Black citizens of Ann Arbor, Michigan, sued the city for failing to teach their children to read. Linguist Geneva Smitherman assembled the witnesses, including myself, who convinced federal judge Charles Joyner to fine for the plaintiffs. He delivered his opinion on July 12, 1979, and directed the Ann Arbor School Board to submit to him within 30 days a plan. 1, to identify children speaking AAVE, and 2, to use that knowledge in teaching such students how to read standard English. In the years that followed, little progress was made in following Judge Joyner's direction. Programs that build on contrastive analysis of AAVE and standard English have met violent objections from parents, teachers, and the general public, who have not absorbed linguist view of AAVE. In 1970, I left Columbia to teach at Penn. I found that the low reading scores of Black children in Philadelphia, as in New York, had remained a barrier to their progress. Conferring with Ira Harkavy and Corey Bowman at Penn Center for Community Partnerships, I converted my course on AAVE to an academically based service learning course. Well, I developed the Reading Road, a reading program for the early grades that used our knowledge of the alphabet and its relationship to AAVE. The Reading Road is used by Penn undergraduate volunteers in the Penn Reading Initiative, tutoring second and third graders in local schools. And the stories I wrote for the Reading Road were produced as graphic novels. They give voice to young people with a long history of being punished through no fault of their own. The next slide is a page from the story, Take Off Your Coat. The hero is in detention. Why? Because the principal sent him there. Why? Because he had refused to take off his coat when the teacher told him to. How come? Because there was a hole in his pants. How come? Because he ripped them getting a neighbor's cat down from a tree. It actually happened that way. This incident was in the school records of Larry Hawthorne, who we heard from earlier. Social linguists often take the side of the speaker they study. John Ball's demonstration of racial profiling in housing applications had a national impact in identifying racial bias to speech. We also see this in the presidential addresses to the Linguistic Society of America by the three linguists who have nominated me for this award. Eckert, 2019, showed that the use of double negatives was a clear symbol of resistance to school norms on the part of the young women in the high school she studied, characterizing it as a claim to autonomy, rebelliousness, or toughness. Rickford, 2016, called attention to the ways in which the voices of minority witnesses are obscured in the courtroom. And Wolfham's address in 2002 defended the use of Black English in the Ebonics controversy. One large-scale numerical project that our laboratory undertook might seem remote from social justice. This was the Atlas of North American English, created by myself, Sherry Ash, and Charles Boberg. It was based on telephone interviews of all cities of the US and Canada of more than 50,000 population. It now forms a base for all studies of sound change in North American English. It also provides a dramatic example of how large-scale quantitative research can decide matters of social justice. This is the case of Paul Prinzivalli, a cargo handler from New York City who was working for Pan American Airways in Los Angeles. A series of bomb threats against the airline had been made by telephone. These calls had been recorded, and we'll hear an excerpt from one of them on this slide.
And a bomb going off.
The company executives and the police thought that the caller sounded like Prinzivalli, known to be a disgruntled employee. Prosecutors had offered him a plea bargain, time served and 5 years probation for a guilty plea. Prinzivalli refused, though he knew he faced a possible 6 to 8 years in prison if he's found guilty. Since it was a matter of voice identification, and Prinzivalli was from New York City, the phonetics lab at UCLA sent me a copy of the tapes. As soon as I heard them, I knew that Prinzivalli was innocent. The bomb threats were made by someone with an Eastern New England vowel system, where bomb has the same vowel as off. For Prinzivalli, a New Yorker, they're very different, bomb and off, as shown in the atlas. But how to convince Californians who were here New Yorkers and New England as the same? I have been told that expert witnesses were limited to giving opinions of the evidence. But I look for a way to establish that Prinzivalli's innocence was a fact. I showed Judge Gordon Ringer the acoustic analyses of the bomb threats and Prinzivalli's repetitions, demonstrating that the bomb threat caller used the same vowel in bomb and off as in the atlas shows for speakers from Eastern New England. On the other hand, Prinzivalli had distinct phonemes for bomb and off, as the atlas shows for New Yorkers. You'll hear and see first the bomb threat caller and second Prinzivalli.
And a bomb going off. And a bomb going off.
The judge then said to Prinzivalli, "Stand up. Say the Pledge of Allegiance." Prinzivalli said, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America." The judge said to me, "What can you tell me about that?" I said, "It shows he's a New Yorker, because it's the only dialect in the Eastern United States where a short A in flag is raised from A to air. On Monday morning, the judge asked the attorneys if they had any further evidence to present. They did not. He then found the defendant not guilty on the basis of the linguistic evidence, which he described as objective and powerful. Judge Ringer later told the LA Times that it was the ahs and the ahs that did it. The prosecutor had to agree with this assessment. Prince of Valley later sent me a thank you card, saying that he had spent 15 months in jail waiting for someone to demonstrate the truth of the matter as I had done. I have had many scientific results where the convergence of evidence was so strong that I felt that I had laid my hands on the reality behind the surface. But nothing could be more satisfactory for any scientific career than to separate fact from fiction in this case. By means of linguistic evidence, one man could be freed from the corporate enemies who had assailed him, and another could sleep soundly on the conviction that he had made a just decision.
Thank you, Bill. Your dedication to linguistic justice is an example for all of us, regardless of discipline. So we have some questions. I'd like to first invite the first question from Walt Wolfram from NC State, who's one of the Academy members who nominated Bill for this award. Walt?
Okay, first of all, Bill, congratulations on this wonderful, and I can't think of a more deserving person for this award. And basically, I followed your career since the mid-1960s, and it's been an inspiration for mine. You know, you've done so many things and worked with so many communities, from Martha's Vineyard to sort of surveys of the United States, Philadelphia, New York City, and so forth. And linguistically, you've worked on, you know, everything from sort of narratives to sort of detailed acoustic analysis. And I wonder, as you review your career, and as I say, review your career, I also want to report a little incident. A few years ago, when I went to University of Pennsylvania for an external visit, my job from the committee was to find out what Bill's plans were for the future, because people were wondering if he was planning to retire. Yeah. And since I was the sociolinguist on there, I was tasked to ask Bill what his plans were so that they can inform the university. So I said to Bill, so I said, Bill, what are your plans for the future? And he proceeded to tell me 2 research proposals that he was working on and planned to conduct. And his wife sort of turned to me and said, well, he'll never retire. And in a sense, that's so true of you. But as you look back on your career, what is your biggest surprise intellectually in terms of sort of all the things you've done from sort of, theoretical? And what is the biggest surprise in terms of sort of your social impact on humanities and the social world? I'm interested in both phases of this because no one has combined these in a more synergistic way than you. And I wonder sort of what the biggest surprises were in terms of your linguistics and what the biggest surprises were in terms of your social application.
One way I can answer that is by quoting what I say to students sometimes when they've been entered the field and wondering whether they're on the right track. My usual routine is to say, it should be that when you're 7 years old, you don't feel you've wasted your time. And I think of the work of the people represented in this meeting, that we have been surprised by the uniformity and the clarity of their work, as well as its value to society. They feel they're on the right track. And that one example that I gave in my talk, these data that we've gathered and so painstakingly over the years suddenly take shape. Force that makes us convinced there's the quality out there for ourselves. What we're doing is well worth doing. One most point to raise is, well, I've been astonished and surprised, most of all, by the achievements of my students. People have come and done things that I hadn't imagined could be done before, and not many of them are represented at this meeting.
Thank you, Bill. So our next question will come from John Rickford of Stanford University, another co-nominator. And after John's question, we'll have time for a couple questions from the audience. So I invite you to go into the participant tab and select raise hand if there's a question you'd like to ask. We probably won't have time for too many, but I just wanted to invite you to ask anyone in the audience to ask questions. And also to remind you again that we are preserving the chat to share with Bill. So if you'd like to drop another message into the chat before the end of the meeting. John, you have a question?
Yes. Bill, I wanted to start by thanking you for so wonderfully combining theory, methodology, and application in linguistics, which is something that not everyone believes in. And also, as a former student, you have many of your former students listening today, for stretching us. Sometimes we might have felt that you're pushing us too hard, but you always combine that stretching with support, encouragement, and love. And we thank you for that. My question is, you've made applied contributions in many areas, particularly in education and in criminal justice. Do you feel that one area is better for those of us who are interested in making contributions, that we're likely to make more substantive contributions, let's say in criminal justice, than in education, or education and criminal justice, or other areas like housing and so on that other people have done so well in working on? What do you think?
I was able in this short presentation to mention the role of the Center for Community Partnership and the Knitter Center at Penn. Because in trying to answer your question, John, I reflect on what we think about what takes place at the meetings concerned with the promotion of young people and their application for a full professorship. I've been on 3 such committees over the years. The fact that there's a bias in the answer to your question. So far, we've not reached the point that strenuous activities in the application of our work is given as much credit as clarity and more theoretical directions. And the Center for Community Partnership and the Knitter Center was mentioned in my proposal because I feel that its role in answering your question is becoming increasingly strong, and that more and more young people are going to think of their major research entering the area of application and social progress rather than the more abstract and glamorous aspects of our field.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Are there any questions from the audience? We do, as I mentioned, have a raise hands if you go to participants at the bottom of your Zoom screen and would like to ask a question.
Greetings and thank you so much.
And Bill, not only did you change my life when you allowed me to meet with you coming over from Temple University to the University of Pennsylvania, where I was frightened and thought I could never, ever really be an effective linguist. But I want to take this opportunity to also thank Gillian. Those of us who know you and love you know that she's been a tremendous partner throughout. And I know that you always give her tributes. And I wanted to at least share in a comment how much we appreciate not only everything that you've done, but the partnership that you have shared together. We love you both.
Well, I'll take the chance to say thank you very much, John. We are very, very happy we've been able to work together, and we have such a wonderful network of people like yourself who are carrying on the tradition. So thank you.
Thank you, John.
Well, let me just close things and thank you all. It's been a really wonderful event today. We have thank you all for joining us. I'd like to thank Wendell, Penny, Gillian, Walt, and John for all their help. And a final word of congratulations to Bill LeBove. Wonderful to celebrate your work. And so with those words, I hereby dissolve the 2095th stated meeting of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Thank you all for joining us.